What is racialization? It is a process of ascribing racial identities to a group that did not identify itself as such for the purpose of creating domination and social exclusion. Racialization is used as a form of dehumanizing a group in order to make them vulnerable as an outgroup. Acceleratingly, Mexicans have been the target of racialization in order to render them more exploitable and excludable. Mexican Americans constitute the nation's second largest minority group. Just here in South Tucson, that is speaking to about 80% of the population. Historically, there has been an influx number of immigrant traffic due to Arizona being a border state. This has led to there being constant turmoil and politically heavy, yet humanly excluding portrayals of Mexicans. It has been seen as a culture of illegal aliens, as if each person was not a human, each person carrying a family, a culture on their backs, which they wish to improve the life of not just them, but the descendants of which they carry. It leaves many Mexican Americans vulnerable to the systematic racialization in which the U.S. disregards and diminishes the importance of a culture that is being shared by a border. Statistically speaking, Hispanics throughout the years have always carried the largest dropout percentage amongst other ethnicities. Though over the years dropout rates have significantly dropped for all races, it is still prevalently Hispanics who carry the highest dropout rate. And one might ask, why is that? A large portion can be greatly contributed to the racialization that has been put on the education given towards Hispanics when we look at data. Representing the educational attainment by Hispanics in the U.S., Hispanics significantly have a lower percentage in higher education completed, though this does not stop those chasing their dreams, as some may wish. Throughout the educational journey of a Hispanic, there have been various barriers placed on them by the dominant culture. Just here in Tucson, there have been various attacks upon the education granted towards those Hispanics. Since the 1980s, Hispanic education has been under attack greatly by the neoliberal policies like banning bilingual education statewide. One of the largest attacks was the potential ban on Mexican studies here in Tucson. Mass was first integrated here throughout the TUSD school district. This allows for ethnic classes to be accessible to the students to learn of their heritage, their history, and the root to their culture which they identify to. This sincerely angered the dominant culture, which led to an attack on the studies and the desire to stop these ethnic classes from being available. HB 2281 was a straight anti-Latino policy that fired an attack on the ethnic program despite the high success rates that it has produced. Mass was not only correlated to having higher test scores, graduation rates, college entry levels to low-income communities, but it was one of the most successful programs in a high school in the entire country. It opens the classroom up to topics and research that is traditionally withheld from typical history books. Historically, Mexicans have been politically ridiculed and racialized by the hegemony to be sources of cheap labor, and seen as indolent and unprogressive in all education and culture. This is why it's been systematically pushed for Mexicans to be seen as the ones who do quote-unquote dirty jobs, often referred to as not being ambitious, to being drunks, lazies, and even called job stealers. Historically, Mexicans have been racialized to be a standard of poor wage pay, exploitation in hours, and little to no work compensation through work benefits. They are constantly viewed as exploitable and harassed throughout their workplace. Another point of exploitation by the hegemony is through Hispanic income. As seen through the poor job offerings and wages, here in Tucson it holds one of the lowest median incomes throughout all races, but more so toward Hispanics. Statistically speaking, Hispanics in Tucson hold a much lower median income than that of the standard U.S. median annual income. When Latinos' income is looked up, 56% of families have housing cost burdens due to 30% of that Latino household income being spent just on housing. The dominance that is wanting to be placed upon Mexicans is greatly seen throughout the communities. Mexicans statistically live within lower income communities where housing is poor. Health conditions could be so great that it puts the community at risk, and those communities are often high in crime. The hegemony's infiltration through gentrification only causes higher cost burdens on families through increased living costs, leaving low income communities at risk and susceptible to the control of the dominant culture. Though the war of racialization towards Mexicans won't be over anytime soon, it is only right to say there is still a community that is fighting for the voice to be heard, of their culture to be respected, and to confidently stand up and proudly represent that Mexican American heritage cannot be erased from our blood.